As I stood at the sink, washing dishes, my husband Eric suddenly dropped a bombshell. "Sophia, I want a divorce." I froze, my hands still submerged in the soapy water. "But why?" I stammered, completely caught off guard by his blunt statement. "You see, I'm about to come into $6 million, he continued, as if this was just some casual conversation. "That's a lot of money, and I don't want to share it with you." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "What does that have to do with a divorce?" Eric sighed, leaning against the counter. "The truth is, I only stayed with you for the money. Your salary isn't much, but it was something. I've tolerated this marriage because it paid some bills, but once I get that money, I don't need you anymore. I want to live my life stress-free, and that means being alone. So let's just end this." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, but I knew right then and there that this was my chance to break free from the exhausting life I had been leading. "Fine," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "If you're going to have that much money, sell the house. It'll pay off the mortgage and we can both move on." Eric looked a bit taken aback by how easily I agreed. Maybe he expected a fight or tears. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I walked over to the living room, grabbed some papers, and slammed them onto the table. This was my opportunity to say goodbye to the man who had drained me emotionally for far too long. "My name is Sophia. I'm a preschool teacher who loves kids, and I met Eric through a mutual friend. He's 2 years older than me, and for the first few years, we were happy. We bought a house, talked about having children, and for a while, it felt like life was going in the right direction. But then everything changed after we got married. Eric's personality took a drastic turn. He became obsessed with money, and that obsession seemed to cloud every conversation we had. Before we got married, he used to tell me how admirable my job was, how he respected the work I did. But those compliments faded away quickly. "All you do is play with kids all day, Sophia," Eric would say, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm out here busting my butt while you've got it easy." His hurtful comments became a regular part of our conversations. He started to call me a freeloader, even though I worked just as hard in my own way. Being a daycare teacher is no walk in the park. Every child is unique, and we're responsible for their safety and well-being. It's a huge responsibility, but Eric never saw it that way. No matter how much I tried to explain, he refused to understand, and his words stung deeply. We had been married for 8 years, and the reason we didn't have children was because of him. "If you've got time to think about babies," he'd say, "you should be working more. Don't even think about quitting your job just because you want a child. We have bills to pay, Sophia." Every time I brought up the idea of starting a family, he would shut me down so harshly that I eventually stopped mentioning it. Eric made more money than me, sure, but the difference wasn't huge. Yet he acted like he was leagues above me, as if I contributed nothing to our life together. I took pride in my work, and being constantly belittled by him was devastating. His cruel words cut deep, and more often than not, I found myself crying alone after he had gone to bed. Recently, Eric had been talking more and more about wanting to be alone. "I could easily live on my own," he'd say. "I'm only sticking around because it's convenient for now." I couldn't understand why he always looked down on me. It didn't make sense. And even though he was working overtime more often, I knew it wasn't translating to more income. I kept close track of our finances, and his salary wasn't going up, no matter how many extra hours he put in. "Maybe if you worked harder, I wouldn't have to pick up the slack," he'd snap at me. "You should be grateful for what I do." But I wasn't buying it. The numbers didn't lie, and his paycheck remained steady. When I pointed this out, he flew into a rage. "Do you know who's keeping this lifestyle afloat? I could leave you any time, Sophia. Don't forget that." His words felt like a threat, and I could feel the tension between us growing thicker with each passing day. He hadn't been like this before we got married, and I found myself wondering how things had gotten so bad. The final straw came during a visit to his parents for Thanksgiving. His mother, with her usual warmth, offered us tea and asked, "It's been 8 years since you two got married, right? Sophia, you used to say you wanted kids soon. Have you thought about it? You're not getting any younger." I was just about to speak when Eric cut in. "Mom, we're not having kids." Sophia and I already decided. I froze, stunned by his words. That wasn't true at all. What? I whispered. Yeah, Eric continued, ignoring my confusion. Sophia hates the idea of taking care of kids. She gets enough of that at work. Before I could correct him, his mom nodded and said, Well, if that's what you've both decided, then that's fine. In the car on the way home, I confronted him. Why would you lie like that? I've always wanted children. Eric just shrugged. We can't afford it, Sophia. You don't make enough money, so you don't get to have a say. I sat there in silence, completely crushed. At work, even the children could sense something was wrong. One of the little girls in my class, Emma, came up to me and asked, Miss Sophia, why do you look sad today? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. I'm fine, I said, giving Emma a gentle pat on her head. Emma was always a quiet, thoughtful child, mature beyond her years. She wasn't one to seek attention, but her kindness always shone through. I couldn't help but think that she must be raised in a loving environment. You're not fine, Miss Sophia, Emma said softly, her eyes full of concern. You're usually much happier. I don't like seeing you sad. I felt awful that a child as young as Emma was worried about me. I forced a smile, not wanting her to carry my burdens. It's sweet of you to care, Emma. But really, I'm okay. Emma wasn't convinced. Maybe my daddy can help you. He's a superhero. He helps a lot of people, and he's picking me up tomorrow. I'll tell him about your problem. Emma's enthusiasm made me chuckle, despite the heaviness in my heart. Her father didn't usually pick her up. Her mother did most days. But Emma mentioned her dad was coming the next day because her mom was busy. She was determined to introduce me to him, and I couldn't refuse her, even though I felt uneasy about sharing my personal issues with a stranger. The next day arrived, and sure enough, Emma's father came to pick her up as she had promised. He was polite and well-spoken, just as I remembered from the school's entrance ceremony. Thank you for taking care of Emma, he said with a kind smile. She talks about you all the time and seems to really enjoy her time here. Oh, it's my pleasure. Emma is such a sweet, thoughtful girl, I replied, feeling a little awkward under the circumstances. I didn't feel comfortable discussing my problems with him, even though Emma had insisted. My situation wasn't something you could just casually bring up. Still, Emma was persistent. Daddy, Miss Sophia is worried about something. Can you help her? Her father glanced at me, sensing my hesitation. I understand if you're not ready to talk about it, he said gently. But if you ever need help, don't hesitate to reach out. My daughter is very concerned, and we'd love to assist in any way we can. He handed me a business card. I glanced at it, noticing his title, but at that moment, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was fate, or maybe I had just reached my breaking point, but I decided then and there that I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I was going to take control of my life, and I would make Eric regret ever treating me this way. As I was making plans to move forward with my life, Eric approached me once again, casually throwing another curveball. Hey, how about we finally go through with that divorce? He said nonchalantly, as if it were nothing more than deciding what to have for dinner. It had been a long time since we sat down for a meal together, so hearing him bring this up now, especially while we were in the middle of dinner, was jarring. My hands froze as I was washing the dishes, and I turned to look at him, unsure of what to say. Eric seemed to think my silence meant I was shocked, so he grinned smugly. I know you don't like it, but my mind's made up. Why now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A huge sum of money is coming my way. Do you want to know how much? $6 million. That's right, $3 million. He spoke as if he couldn't wait to gloat, even though I hadn't asked for any of these details. He continued, I only stayed with you because of the money. Yours isn't much, but it was something. Now that I have $3 million, I don't need you anymore. So, let's end this. You've had your time freeloading off me. I was furious, but I didn't let it show. Where did you get all that money? I asked, even though there were so many other things I wanted to say. That's none of your business. We're strangers now, Eric said dismissively. Fine, I replied. Let's get the divorce over with then. Eric looked surprised at how quickly I agreed. Maybe he expected more resistance, but I was ready to be rid of him. I don't plan on living in this small house anymore, Eric continued arrogantly. With $6 million, I'm buying mansion. So, I'm going to sell the house too. That's fine, I said. I'll find a place to live, and you can use the money to pay off the mortgage, right? Yeah, I'll take care of it. I guess it's the least I can do. His smugness was unbearable. With that, I decided it was time to put my plan into action. I busied myself with packing, preparing for the new chapter in my life. When the divorce proceedings were nearly finalized, I arranged a meeting with Eric to discuss the final details. I'm leaving the mortgage payments to you, I said, sliding a document across the table. I don't want any confusion later, so I've drafted an agreement that outlines everything. Please sign it. Eric, still flipping through the papers, suddenly paused. Wait a minute. What's this about alimony? Why should I be paying you anything? If anything, you should be paying me. You're the one who doesn't work full-time. I stayed calm and laid out more documents in front of him. You thought you could hide everything from me, didn't you? You've been so naive, Eric. His face turned pale as he looked at the photos I placed in front of him. They showed him with another woman, walking arm in arm, laughing together. She's just a junior colleague, he stammered. This doesn't mean anything. Really? I asked, holding up another photo. This one showed Eric and the same woman entering a hotel together. Eric's eyes widened in panic, but he wasn't ready to give in. These are fake. Photos can be manipulated these days, you know? You can't fool me with this. I sighed deeply. I knew this would be his reaction, but I had prepared for this. This isn't just about pictures, Eric, I said calmly. I have more evidence than you can imagine. You're not walking away from this easily. Eric's confidence faltered as I revealed the full extent of what I had gathered against him. This was only the beginning. My quiet strength would soon become his downfall. I think they'll be here soon, I said, just as the doorbell rang. Eric's face paled with confusion and worry. He wasn't sure what was about to happen. I calmly went to the door and returned with 2 people in tow. Eric was in for a surprise. This is my attorney, I announced as I motioned them into the living room. These photos and documents were gathered by a private detective agency. There's no way they could be fake. But if you're having doubts, should I call them right now? I said it with such calmness that it rattled him. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Sophia's attorney, my lawyer chimed in, flashing a confident smile. From now on, we'll handle all divorce proceedings through me. Do you have any questions or concerns about these photos? I'll gladly explain everything to you. Eric, who had been putting up a front of bravado, began to panic. The truth was out. His claims of working late and overtime had been a lie. The detective agency had found out that he had been leaving work on time all along, sneaking away to spend his nights with his mistress. That explained why his salary hadn't increased, because he wasn't actually putting in the extra hours he claimed to. Suddenly, everything made sense. When Eric had started saying he wanted to be alone, it wasn't just his usual selfishness. It was because he wanted more time with his lover. And now, his affair was out in the open, leaving him with nowhere to hide. Emma's father had been right when he stepped in to help me. I didn't realize at the time how much influence he had. He wasn't just a supportive parent. He was the CEO of a major company, with connections to top-tier lawyers and detectives. His daughter's claim that her father was a superhero wasn't far off the mark. He had pulled together a team that exposed every one of Eric's lies. Eric tried to put on a brave face. You want alimony?
Fine.
I've got $6 million, remember? I can afford it.
Just get out of here.
I never want to see you again. I remained calm, packing my things. I would have left regardless, Eric. If there's anything else in the future, we'll handle it through the lawyer. Don't come to me directly. Who would ever want to see you again? He spat out, his pride still intact, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He didn't expect me to be so prepared. I silently gathered the last of my belongings and walked out of the house that had once felt like a home. As I left, I wondered how someone could be so arrogant even at the end. Eric had no idea how close he had come to losing everything. For a few months, I settled into my new life. I moved into a quiet apartment where I could finally breathe without the constant tension. It wasn't the easiest adjustment, but without Eric in my life, the constant stress that had hung over me like a cloud was finally gone. The relief was undeniable. But just as I was getting used to the peace, Eric showed up at my door. He was pounding on it, shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Please, Sophia. You've got to listen to me," he yelled. Reluctantly, I opened the door to see his pathetic figure standing in the hallway. "What do you want?" I asked coldly, making it clear I had no interest in anything he had to say. Eric forced a smile, looking around my apartment. "You've got a nice place here. You know, there's plenty of room for two. Maybe I could move in? We could make one of these rooms mine." I stared at him, disbelief written all over my face. "Are you serious? There's no way I'm living with a stranger."
Come on, Sophia.
"Don't be so harsh. We were married once, remember? There's no reason we can't be together again," he said, his voice dripping with fake charm. "We're strangers now, Eric. Legally. So stop acting like we're still something." "Don't talk like that, Sophia. You're scaring me," he said, his voice wavering. "I've realized that I need you in my life. We can start over. You were happy with me, right?" I scoffed. "You were living in a mansion with your mistress, Eric. I was nothing but a convenience to you. Why would I take you back now?" Eric's face twisted, and to my shock, he started to cry. "Sophia, I never actually had $6 million, he sobbed. "I thought I won the lottery, but I was wrong. I misread the numbers. I jumped to conclusions, thinking I'd get rich and be able to leave you. But it was a mistake." I stood there, stunned. "What are you even talking about?" "I quit my job," he wailed, his desperation now fully on display. "I thought I'd won, so I badmouthed my boss and quit. But the numbers were wrong, Sophia. I'm ruined. I thought I could do whatever I wanted if I had that money, but now I have nothing." I stared at him, utterly speechless. This was the man I had once thought I'd spend my life with. A man so blinded by greed and arrogance that he'd thrown away everything without a second thought. "I ended things with her," Eric continued, as if that was supposed to change everything. "I realized I need you, Sophia. Please, let's start over. I know you still love me deep down." I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and hollow. "Eric, I don't know what world you're living in, but it's not this one. I'm done with you. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Help me. I'm broke, and I need you. I can't go back to my job, and without the money, I have nothing." His words meant nothing to me. There was no sympathy left in my heart for him. He had dug his own grave, and now he was trying to drag me back into the mess he had created. "You should have thought about that before you treated me like dirt," I said, my voice cold. "This conversation is over. Leave." As I watched Eric stumble out of my apartment, I felt nothing but a sense of closure. This was the final chapter of our story, and for the first time, I felt free. "I didn't have any money, and she stopped contacting me," Eric muttered, his voice filled with defeat. It seemed his mistress had abandoned him, and I wasn't surprised. Who would want a man who was divorced, jobless, penniless, and now homeless? "That's why I can't pay my loan," he continued, desperation creeping into his tone. "I don't have anywhere to live, Sophia. You're my only hope." I remained calm, though inside I was boiling with frustration. "I told you I don't care. And if you stay here any longer, I'll take action. Don't forget the agreement you signed when we divorced. If you break your promise, I can claim 5 times the alimony." Eric's face twisted in anger. He raised his hand, and for a split second, I thought he might actually hit me. "Is that what you're going to do now?" I asked coolly. "If you lay a hand on me, I'll call the cops immediately. You'll be charged with assault. And just so, you know, this apartment complex has security cameras. Even if you run, they'll catch your face clearly." His face turned pale, and he lowered his hand. He knew he couldn't win this one. "Get out now, or I'll report you for trespassing," I added, my voice steady and firm. At the mention of a report, Eric's panic grew. Without another word, he fled, and I heard the sound of someone tumbling down the stairs. I didn't even bother to check. I simply shut the door and locked it behind me, finally closing that chapter of my life for good. Since that day, Eric never returned. Later, I received a visit from my in-laws, who came to apologize. They seemed genuinely shocked by the whole situation, clearly unaware of the depths their son had sunk to. When I asked them how Eric was doing, they explained that he had fractured his leg while fleeing that day and had been hospitalized for 2 months. The medical bills added up quickly, and with his mortgage and alimony payments hanging over his head, Eric was in a tough spot. He had tried begging his former boss to take him back and allow him to work from home, but it was too late. He'd burned that bridge when he quit in such a rude manner. His old employer had no interest in rehiring him. In the meantime, Eric's parents had to step in and cover his alimony payments, along with his mortgage. It was clear that Eric was going to have a difficult time ahead of him, but he had no one to blame but himself. Once my life had settled down, I decided to pay a visit to Emma's house. Her father had been instrumental in helping me turn my situation around, and I wanted to thank him personally. When I told him everything had been resolved, he smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, Sophia," he said. "I've always wanted to meet you in person since Emma talks about you all the time. I didn't expect it to be under these circumstances, though. All I did was make a few calls," he added humbly. "I'm just happy everything worked out." Emma, standing nearby, beamed up at me. "I'm so happy to see Miss Sophia smiling again." Her innocence and kindness were truly heartwarming. In many ways, Emma had been the catalyst for this entire journey. Without her, I may have never met her father, and I might still be stuck in that toxic relationship. She really had changed my life, and I was overwhelmed with gratitude. As I stood there, I reflected on everything that had happened. My husband had looked down on me for being a preschool teacher, but it was because of my job and the people I met along the way that I had found the strength to reclaim my life. I realized how important it is to cherish every encounter and every person who comes into your life. Now, I loved my job more than ever. It wasn't just a job, it was part of who I was. And because of it, I was able to move forward. I felt stronger, more confident, and more determined to keep doing my best, both for myself and for the children like Emma, who looked up to me. The future felt bright again, and I knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready for them.